October 11th, 2024 marks the dual release of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, the return of the Budokai Tenkaichi series to video games, and Dragon Ball Daima, the brand new Dragon Ball anime series. So why not take this double Dragon Ball day and make it a triple Dragon Ball day with my viewing guide on how to watch Dragon Ball. It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and on today's video we're going to be going over every single Dragon Ball anime series, movie, OVA, and special, talking about what order it all goes in, because while it used to be a straightforward thing, it has not been a straightforward thing in the future, and this is an explainer guide on how to watch the Dragon Ball story in order. This is similar to the other viewing guides I've done on this channel for other franchises, but unlike other franchises where you have like multiple entries and several fresh starting points, Dragon Ball is one continuous story. So what I recommend is starting where I say to start and then continue forward through the whole story. It's one story, so it's a little bit different than what we've done before. And for that reason, where in the previous viewing guides I did chronological release order for each series and movie and special and such, we're going to go in story order this time, talking about what you need to watch, what you don't need to watch, and what is going to give you the most streamlined experience. And don't worry, I will do a recap at the end of the most streamlined experience. Now, this is a video I couldn't do alone. I had help from several friends. Thank you to everybody I've talked to about the notes on this guide, because Dragon Ball has been going on for 40 years in animation and manga and video games and everything. And it was a bit of an undertaking. Just focusing on animation, which is what I did, it still was a lot. And so I appreciate everybody that helped me through the notes on this. This is going to be a heck of a guide to see. So if you enjoy this type of video, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe and the notification bell if you haven't already. It really shows support for videos like this on the channel. And it also helps this video get out to more people, and therefore making all this collective effort really worth it. So please, please, please hit the like button. It really, really helps this video get out to more people. Also, leave any comments or concerns or questions in the comment section down below. I'm happy to answer anything that doesn't make any sense. It's easy to do with a franchise running this long. Now, if this is your first time watching Dragon Ball, which, hey, nobody go crazy in the comments, people have not experienced Dragon Ball. A lot of people have. It's one of the most popular stories on the planet Earth, but not everybody has. So here's how I explain what Dragon Ball is. Dragon Ball is a unique storytelling experience because it's the intersection of so many things that establish so many other things. Any type of anime in the battle shonen genre owes something to Dragon Ball, whether it's Naruto or One Piece or Bleach. There is so many things that are inspired by Dragon Ball because Dragon Ball is kind of one of the first to really pull this forward. Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, who put together the series, he transitions it so masterfully from sort of the comedy gag mangas that he was doing at the time, like Dr. Slump, and then eventually transitioning it into the heavy battle action stuff that Dragon Ball is now known for. And in the storytelling, you will see that. And that's why I always say that people should start from the beginning of the story, because you kind of see this evolution where it's kind of like, oh, we're going on a little adventure before raising the stakes, and eventually you get to the really high stakes of the Dragon Ball Z era of the story. But we will get into all that, of course. What is Dragon Ball about? Well, the title itself is based on the 7 legendary Dragon Balls. Collecting all 7 can summon the magical dragon and grant you any wish you want. That is a temptation for many, and our characters are seeking out the Dragon Balls while fighting villains who aren't. But in between the time that the Dragon Balls have to be reset and refound, there's tournaments, there's alien invaders that cause threats to Earth. And the heart and core and soul of it, Dragon Ball is a story about family and growth. Characters grow, they train, they push harder to do better, and they seek out their own goals and ideas, but they work together as a family. Dragon Ball is very much a family-centric story, and I think that's why it resonates with so many people. Yeah, you have your big crazy action scenes, but everybody goes home at the end of the day to see their family, and that's what makes Dragon Ball so special. It has a lot of heart and a lot of connection, and that's what I love about it. So with Dragon Ball, whether this is the first time you're watching the series, or the first time you're watching it in order, or the 50th time, this guide is for you. All right, let's go over some basic rules before we get started on the guide. I think this is good, some baseline, so we know how this is going to be structured. First things first, like I said, we're going in story order. This is going to make the most sense overall. I will not be including Daima in the story order because it hasn't aired yet, so while I can guess where it takes place in the timeline, I'm not 100% certain. We will talk about it at the end of the video as kind of like, here's what Daima is, and then I'll tell you my best guess of where it takes place. But we're going to go through everything that's been released first because I can say for sure that's the order. In general, because of the popularity of Dragon Ball for many decades at this point, almost everything is available in Region 1/Region A, whether on streaming or Blu-ray or DVD. There are some exceptions, and I will mention the exceptions herein. There also is an English dub for almost everything, once again with some exceptions. For the sake of brevity, all the movie titles, I will be using the English titles as opposed to the Japanese titles, because the Japanese titles are not only repetitive, they're very long, and that's just going to make me winded from like talking about the Dragon Ball Japanese movie titles. So we're going to go with the English titles. This is not a filler guide. In anime, there's filler, which is kind of things put in to kind of stall for the manga to catch up, and so the anime can progress the story naturally. I'm not worried about what is filler and what is not filler. That's not what this guide is about. There's a whole website about anime filler if that's something you care about. Personally, I don't. It's not my thing, and this is a guide to what the Dragon Ball media is, how it fits together, less so than, oh, this episode is important and this one isn't. That's not for me to say, because I enjoy several of the things that people call filler. I will also add the popular fan series Dragon Ball Z Abridged is absolutely not a good place to start with Dragon Ball if you've never seen it. That is a very popular fan series, and I've seen some people suggest you watch that first. Absolutely do not recommend it. They do amazing work with Team 4-Star, and I love Abridged for what it is, but it is a parody dub of Dragon Ball. It is made for fans. It is made, has a lot of in-jokes to the community and the fandom, and it's not something you should watch as your first entry point into Dragon Ball. It's not a proper representation of Dragon Ball, because it is a parody dub done by fans. And because I want to structure this guide as if it's first-time viewers, no major spoilers at all. So if you're worried about getting spoiled about stuff, there's not going to be major spoilers. There may be spoilers on posters, there may be spoilers in some of the words I use to kind of fit things together, but it's not going to be major plot spoilers. I'm going to keep it pretty low on spoilers. There will be some. Very minor, but there will be some. So that's the basics of the guide. Let's get started. We're going to start from the top of the story and go all the way down to the furthest point in timeline we have. And we will talk about what is canon and what is not canon officially, as well as talk about what fits and what doesn't fit from a fan perspective. This is going to be a bit of a different guide than I've done before, so let's begin. Let's start the story of Dragon Ball with Dragon Ball. So Dragon Ball itself started with a very popular manga, and then it was adapted into an anime. While I love the manga has less material than the actual anime, so I will be referring to the original manga in this, but I won't be using it as the basis. We're going to be going with the anime as the basis because there's just more material to work with there. Now, because that Dragon Ball manga was successful, an anime adaptation by Toei Entertainment came out in 1986. Dragon Ball, lasting for 153 episodes between 86 and 88. This covers volumes 1 through 16 of the Dragon Ball manga, printed in English as 1 through 16 of Dragon Ball. This is the initial starting point of the story. It is how Goku meets Bulma and goes on an adventure to find the Dragon Balls. I really dislike when people skip Dragon Ball on a personal basis, because what other series do people jump to volume 17 on? There is a lot of amazing stuff that happens in the early part of Dragon Ball Z that is a big shocking plot twist reveal. But it only is a plot twist reveal if you've seen Dragon Ball. Now, of course, why would people skip this? Well, Funimation and some other Western distributors had chosen to jump to Dragon Ball Z as opposed to starting with Dragon Ball because of some failed dubs in the past, and Dragon Ball Z was more action-oriented. I get it from a business perspective, but at this point, day and age, where you have access to these shows and they're easy to find, start with the beginning of the series. It is a little bit more Gogeta focused in the beginning, but some of my favorite arcs in the entire franchise are in the later half of Dragon Ball, and you should not skip it. It's an important part of the story. And the nice part too is you don't have to insert anything into your run of Dragon Ball, just watch episode 1 through 153. Now, there are some additional Dragon Ball specials and movies. Let's start with the specials. In 1988, a pair of public service announcement videos, Goku's Traffic Safety and Goku's Fire Brigade. These two specials have never been released outside Japan, never been dubbed into English. They're like 15 minutes each, and it's Goku teaching about fire safety and traffic safety. They're not like revolutionary, they are not canon, they are just fun if you want to seek them out. A lot of people don't even know they exist. I just thought I'd mention them here. Now we get to the Dragon Ball movies. All of the Dragon Ball movies are not original stories meant to kind of fit somewhere in the timeline. They are original stories that have shades and retellings of arcs from Dragon Ball. So none of these are canon, and none of these have to fit in a continuity run. They're kind of fun to watch after you've watched Dragon Ball to kind of relive some events in a different perspective, usually with different villains and sometimes different plot elements. So first of all, 1986, Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies. It's sort of retelling the Emperor Pilaf's saga from the beginning of the series, but with a completely different villain. One more menacing than Pilaf. It also is the first Dragon Ball movie and actually has a pretty good animation budget. This one was dubbed into English, but it was dubbed much later than some of the other movies, so it actually has one of the better dubs. 1987's Sleeping Princess in Devil's Castle. This is a retelling of the Training with Master Roshi arc with Goku and Krillin, and changes things up to the point where they go fight a vampire in his castle. And what's kind of fun with these retellings is there's a bit of continuity if you go from Curse of the Blood Rubies into Sleeping Princess in Devil Castle to 1988's Mystical Adventure. It's like an alternate version of the Dragon Ball story. It sort of connects you through it. It's not totally connected, they're not like intended to do so, but it kind of works. Mystical Adventure does take a different approach. As opposed to adapting one arc, it's kind of taking elements of Red Ribbon Army with Tao Pai Pai, elements of some of the martial arts tournaments, plus elements of the Ten Shinhan arc. So there's a lot going on. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball, I've never watched this movie, I think it's kind of a wild time considering to see how they mix elements together. That was it for Dragon Ball movies during the series run. In 1996, though, for the 10th anniversary, The Path to Power was released. This was a retelling of Goku meeting Bulma, Red Ribbon Army stuff, and some other little things, and kind of was like an anniversary celebration. But it was on more modern animation style, which was actually pretty cool. It's a lot of favorite to many, and it's a nice way to start Dragon Ball if you don't want to jump all the way into the series, and you want to get a taste for Dragon Ball. Path to Power might be a good thing to check out. Like I said, it's not going to follow the exact story of what's in the main story, but it might give you a good sampler taste of, well, I like Dragon Ball because it's got everything in there. It's really a good kind of sampler of Dragon Ball if you want to just try like a short movie as opposed to a full series. And in 2009, Dragon Ball Evolution was a live-action remake that was retelling several elements from the Dragon Ball story. They kind of did a grab bag of elements from all over the timeline of the original Dragon Ball anime and kind of mixed it together into its own version. This was also the only time we got a live-action Dragon Ball movie. Maybe the only time we ever get one, but it's an interesting oddity at that. So in the Dragon Ball manga, there was a major time skip between Volume 16 and Volume 17. And so the decision was made that the Dragon Ball anime would continue adapting the manga after Volume 16, but their Volume 17 adaptation would be retitled to Dragon Ball Z. And this is the version of the show that is most famous to the wider world. Lasting from 1989 to 1996 for 291 episodes, Dragon Ball Z is the iconic anime that people point to when they think of Dragon Ball. It is the one that got the widest reach, it's the one that got the widest distribution, and it was kind of the one that came to a lot of regions first in a major way. The series itself adapted volumes 17 through 42 of the Dragon Ball manga, though if you are looking for the Viz Media English releases, most will separate the 17 through 42 as their own collection of volumes 1 through 26 of Dragon Ball Z. Also of note, when Dragon Ball Z was originally brought over to North America, a lot of editing was done to make it appropriate for kids' television, because Dragon Ball Z really was more violent than Dragon Ball. It kind of took a big leap, and there was a lot of editing done, including taking out some episodes. So the actual original English airing was 276 episodes, not 291, but any modern release that you find will have 291 episodes. But if you end up finding 276 when you're looking for it, you might be looking at the edited English release. Or you might have confusion if you're looking at guides and they're using the old numbers. Now, with the original Dragon Ball Z anime running 291 episodes, and at the time the manga was still coming out, it gets a little long in the tooth in its adaptation. So because of this, and because of the popularity of Dragon Ball, in 2009, Toei did Dragon Ball Kai, a re-edit of Dragon Ball Z that used footage and put in new animation for iconic moments, plus new insert songs that are super catchy. And it was a re-edit to bring back Dragon Ball and kind of revitalize Z and give it a little bit of an easier way to do it. It's not a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood situation where they completely remade the show, but it's recut and it's cut down a whole lot. Compared to the 291 episodes of Z, Kai is only 167. So if you are somebody that was a little bit daunted when I said 291 episodes of Dragon Ball Z, this is a lot more manageable and it's a lot more streamlined. While there's still a lot of really good stuff they added to the Dragon Ball Z anime in the original 291 episode run, it is a lot easier to watch Kai. In fact, when I personally go to rewatch stuff from Z, I just watch the Kai version because it's a lot shorter and it's a lot more streamlined. It really is. Now, Kai's release was a little bit weird, so I want to explain it out here. First of all, Dragon Ball Kai, or Dragon Ball Z Kai as it's known in North America, lasted 98 episodes between 2009 and 2010. This adapted from the beginning of Z, not from the beginning of Dragon Ball, which is a little frustrating, but you know, it's fine. Original Dragon Ball's not that long. But you get from the Saiyan saga all the way through the Cell Game saga. Then 4 years later, the Buu saga was adapted and aired in Japan for 61 episodes. However, when Buu Saga was brought internationally, 8 more episodes were added to make Dragon Ball Z Kai Final Chapters, which was 69 episodes. These additional 8 episodes were added to bring in some of the anime-only editions of Z that international fans really liked that fans in Japan didn't like as much, but there is Japanese and English audio available for all 69 episodes, which is really cool. So overall, Dragon Ball Kai, if you wish, is the probably easier way to watch Z. It's less intense, there's less episodes, and overall you'll probably have a more streamlined experience. That's not to discount the original work done on the original Dragon Ball Z anime. You have a choice here with this part of the story. Do you want to go longer or you want to go shorter? Do you want to go shorter to get into it and then go longer later? Choice is yours. I've given you both options here. So Dragon Ball Z in its original run was insanely popular, and so a lot of movies and specials exist for the series. But which ones are important? Which ones should you actually watch? Well, as a lifelong Dragon Ball fan who talked to lifelong Dragon Ball fans about this, I got the definitive list. But we are going to go through all of them so you know what they are. Alright, we're going to begin with the TV special with 1990's Bardock, the father of Goku. For the longest time, this was the canon backstory to Goku's father. And I'm not going to say any more than that, because spoilers. But it has been rewritten by a recent Dragon Ball Super movie that was written by Akira Toriyama, so it's not technically canon anymore. But at the time it was, and the anime does do flashbacks to it, so I still recommend watching it and just figuring it out for yourself later. Now, while this does take place prior to the Dragon Ball series, it didn't air till after Dragon Ball Z episode 50, and so if you're going to watch it, I recommend watching it either after Dragon Ball Z episode 74 or Kai episode 35. In 1992, the Summer Vacation special, this was a non-canon special where the cast recapped the movies that had come out prior to this. You don't need to watch it. It was never released on DVD, even in Japan, so it's not easy to find, though if you look around, I'm sure it's out there on the internet somewhere. It's the internet, right? But it's kind of a fun little side thing, but not anything super necessary. However, the 1993 special History of Trunks is probably the most important Dragon Ball thing that is not in the series itself. This is the backstory for the character of Trunks, and it's still canon, and it has not been rewritten, and it has not been reinserted in anything. I stress to you, if you're watching Dragon Ball Z, I highly recommend watching this special because it adds in a lot of character backstory, and the anime does allusions to it later on, so it's kind of an important deal. Also because this is an expanded version of the special chapter from volume 33 of the manga. It is a canon thing. This is a canon special that we need to look at. This originally aired after episode 128 of Dragon Ball Z. However, I do recommend you watch it after episode 125 of Z or episode 58 of Kai. Come back in the comments if this is the first time you watched it and you just like come back and you're like, remember that guy that told me to watch History of Trunks there? And you'll love where I placed it. And longtime Dragon Ball fans, check what episodes I placed it between. I think that's the perfect spot to watch History of Trunks. And then the last TV special, 1983, looking at it all, the year-end show, is a New Year's special. It recaps some of the series, never released in Japan on DVD, never released outside of Japan at all. Just like the Summer Vacation special, not super important. Okay, so here's the fun part, movies. There are 13 Dragon Ball Z movies. Some of these are ranging in runtimes from 30 minutes up to an hour, depending on where they were placed in the Toei anime festivals. That's a whole history for another day, but Toei would run these festivals where they'd play 2 to 3 short movies based on their current shows. Dragon Ball was a big headliner of these. Because of that, the movies were produced by a separate production team on a separate production track than the anime and the manga. The anime was trying to stick to the manga, the movies were just doing whatever the hell they wanted. Now, because of this, we got a lot of really cool movies in here, and I wouldn't just say, don't ever watch them, but you don't need to worry about actually inserting any of these movies because they're all officially not canon. They're all in their own timeline, and without a doubt, you don't have to watch any of these during Dragon Ball Z. If you have chosen the path of watching original Dragon Ball Z and not Kai, you need to watch 1989's Dragon Ball Z Dead Zone before the series itself. This movie has a sequel in the Dragon Ball Z anime. The Garlic Jr. saga is a sequel to this movie, whose villain is Garlic Jr. The thing is that arc is filler and is not included in Kai. So if you're not watching Original Z, you don't need to worry about watching this. But if you are watching Original Z, you need to slip this in. And it fits best before Z, though there are some continuity problems almost immediately. Luckily, Dead Zone was the only movie that had an in-series follow-up. The rest of these are for fun, though I have included a couple spots you could slip a couple in if you want to. 1990's The World's Strongest. It aired after episode 39 of Dragon Ball Z, and I can't find any place to put it in the timeline, but it sees the evil Dr. Wheelo coming up with monsters to defeat Goku, and it's fun. It's a fun action movie. Most of these are for fun. They're not like trying to add to the overall canon, but a lot of these villains pop up in video games. What I would recommend is that when you finish watching Dragon Ball Z in either original or Kai, go back and watch these movies just for fun. They're worth at least watching once. 1990's The Tree of Might aired after episode 54 of Dragon Ball Z. Once again, cannot fit it in the timeline, but it does see the villain Turles, who looks mysteriously like a shadow of Goku. 1991's Lord Slug aired after episode 81 of Dragon Ball Z and sees the villainous Lord Slug, a Namekian king who is trying to come and conquer Earth. Also in 1991, Cooler's Revenge, airing after episode 99. This sees Frieza's brother coming to fight Goku. This one actually can kind of fit. There's some minor continuity issues, but you can kind of fit it between Trunks' arrival before the androids appear. So you could watch this after episode 125 of Z or after 58 of Kai before you watch History of Trunks. It's up to you. You don't have to watch it there, but it does sort of slip in. In 1992, The Return of Cooler, which originally aired after episode 130. Once again, not canon. You can slip it in. There is a 10-day gap between the announcement of the Cell games and the actual Cell games themselves, so you could watch it after Dragon Ball Z episode 174 or Kai episode 84. 1992's Super Android 13 sees 3 new androids appear, bent on destroying Goku, which is kind of what happens in the main series too. This aired after episode 147 of Dragon Ball Z and does not fit in the timeline anywhere. 1993's Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan aired after episode 176 of Z. It sees the Saiyan Broly coming for revenge on Goku. There's a lot of people who want revenge on Goku. Broly became one of the most popular and famous characters in the Dragon Ball series, despite being in non-canon movies. And at one time, we could try to fit this into the timeline of Z. However, a new version of Broly that is canon was introduced later, and we'll talk about that later in the guide. 1993's BoJack Unbound aired after episode 192 of Dragon Ball Z, and actually is the one that fits perfectly. Out of all the movies, this one actually put the effort in to explain why certain things happen at certain points in time, and you can go, oh, it takes place after the Cell games, which means you can watch it after episode 194 of Z and episode 98 of Kai, and you're not going to run into almost any continuity problems. It's kind of amazing. It's like the one movie that really put in the work to go, we're going to fit in the timeline somewhere. And I appreciate it for it. 1994, Broly was popular, so he came again in Broly's Second Coming, airing after episode 220 of Dragon Ball Z. Once again, can't fit this in the timeline. And then in 1994, Broly came back again in Bio Broly, airing after episode 232 of Dragon Ball Z, and there isn't really a good place to fit it in the timeline. And in 1995, Fusion Reborn, airing after episode 258 of Dragon Ball Z. No real place to fit this in the timeline, but it sees a conflict where characters are breaking out of hell, and that's honestly a fun premise. And then lastly, in 1995, Wrath of the Dragon, airing after episode 270 of Dragon Ball Z. This can actually fit in the timeline during the time of peace at the end of the series, so if you want to watch it after Dragon Ball Z episode 287 or Kai episode 165. You don't have to fit it in there, but it's the best place to fit it, and hey, a few movies fit, the rest of them don't. That's kind of how the movies go, but I think all of them are at least worth a single watch for a Dragon Ball fan. So the next category is OVAs, or original video animation. Once again, I think officially most of these are non-canon, and only one of these can actually fit in the timeline. 1993's Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans is a 2 VHS tape video guide to a video game of the same name. It was a new animation produced to kind of show you how to make your way through the game, because it was kind of a maze thing from what I understand. This is not canon, of course. It's never been released outside of Japan, so there's no official English release or English dub, but it is in the same style of the 90s Dragon Ball animation. It's kind of a neat little side thing. Interestingly enough, it was famous enough that in 2010, Plan to Eradicate the Super Saiyans was created, which was an HD remake done by the staff that was working on Kai, and this actually was released outside Japan as a bonus with the Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 video game, which also featured its main villain as a playable character. Now, while it was included on that game, it was not dubbed into English, it was subtitles only with Japanese audio. In 2008, The Return of Son Goku and Friends is a 35-minute special that premiered at the Jump Super Anime Tour. This actually has a story by Akira Toriyama, which I believe was his first work on Dragon Ball since the ending of the original manga. And it actually does fit in the timeline in the time of peace after Dragon Ball Z 287, either before or after Wrath of the Dragon, depending on how you're doing it. When this was released originally, it was streaming online officially in English, but was taken down shortly after because it was a limited time viewing, and it has had no official release since. And in 2011, episode of Bardock is a what-if sequel to the Bardock Father of Goku TV special. It's 100% not canon. It's just kind of a fun little what-if kind of thing to follow up on. And ironically, it was released outside Japan as included with copies of Dragon Ball Z for Connect. It wasn't dubbed. It was just Japanese only with English subtitles. But boy, at least something was worth it with Dragon Ball Connect. And now, my friends, we've come to the point in the video where the people that haven't watched Dragon Ball before and haven't kept up with it are probably going to have some glazed over eyes. The problem with Dragon Ball is that we've had two continuations of the story after Z. And one was done by Akira Toriyama and one wasn't. So I was trying to debate, how do we talk about this? And I thought, let's talk about the one that came out first, Dragon Ball GT. This was a sequel to Z. It follows up from the end of Z. The last episode of Z goes right into GT. It's a huge time skip and they go several years later. But Akira Toriyama wasn't involved in the story process of this. And because of that, with Akira Toriyama's recent work on Dragon Ball, GT is no longer canon. So it's kind of a what-if sequel at this point, but it also is some people's preferred sequel to Z. So that's why we're talking about it. We're not just throwing it out because it's not canon. And officially, because of the way video games worked out, it's an alternate timeline sequel, which I think is kind of neat. Naturally, it is not based on a manga. It is an anime original series lasting for 64 episodes from 1996 to 1997. Now, while GT is a sequel to the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z animes, it does bring in elements of the Z movies and follows up on those. So because of it, if you're wanting to watch GT, it's kind of good to watch all of the Z movies as well. GT didn't last very long, it didn't have too many side things, but there was the 1997 TV special A Hero's Legacy, which takes place 100 years after GT, but before GT's final epilogue scene. And that was GT. It's essentially rendered as a what-if timeline now, and I think that still has its place in the marketing. But let's talk about the official canon sequel to Z, Dragon Ball Super. I apologize once again if this is confusing. Toei Animation and even Akira Toriyama have made it a little bit messy to cover. So this is just how it's going to go. We got Dragon Ball Super to talk about. Okay, so first things first. Before Dragon Ball Super existed, after Dragon Ball Kai was over, two movies were released. Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods in 2013 and Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F in 2015. Both of these are set during the time of peace of Dragon Ball Z, which means these two movies and Super take place after Dragon Ball Z episode 287 or Kai 165. The last few episodes of Z and the last few episodes of Kai take place after Super. However, because of the events in Dragon Ball Super, the ending arcs of Dragon Ball Z kind of don't make sense. So timeline-wise, if you're watching this in order and I give you the streamlined timeline at the end, you're going to be like, this doesn't feel like it fits, and it's because it doesn't, because of the new material that's been added in. So the thing was, we had Battle of Gods and we had Resurrection F. Why did I mention those here and not during the Dragon Ball Z segment? Well, that's because in 2015, Dragon Ball Super began airing for 131 episodes until 2017. The first 2 arcs of Dragon Ball Super are remakes of Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. Those 2 movies were redone as 13-episode arcs in the Super anime, expanded on, expanded upon, and built upon to make longer stories. So because of this, you could watch the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F movies and jump to the 3rd arc in Super, or you could skip those movies and start Super. The choice is yours. It's a little bit more streamlined to just say, watch Super and don't worry about those movies. But it is a little bit shorter to watch the movies. They tell the same story for the most part. Now, Dragon Ball Super does have a manga, but the manga takes its own path, skipping over some arcs, doing its own thing, making completely different versions. It's like an alternate timeline, that whole manga for Dragon Ball Super. So we're just not going to worry about that as much. That's the last time I'm going to be mentioning that manga here. Now, Dragon Ball Super was popular, and it was kind of cut short at the height of its popularity, and it was kind of an odd thing. But a couple years later, we got Dragon Ball Super Broly in 2018. This movie was written by Akira Toriyama and provides a canon version of the Broly character from the Z movies, as well as some other elements, including a new backstory for Goku's father, which is contradictory to the previous TV special. This is why things got a little bit messy in the Z section, because this movie has sort of overwritten some of that stuff, because this is now the canon version of those events. And with the mad success of that movie, the series did not come back, but instead a second movie was produced in 2022, Dragon Ball Super: Super Hero. This takes place after the Broly movie, which takes place after Super. It's a nice, easy timeline to follow. Interestingly enough, this movie would introduce some new elements, kind of do some follow-up on previous ideas, once again written by Akira Toriyama, and featured Piccolo and Gohan as the main 2 characters, which is a bit of a change of pace for this franchise. Also, this was the first movie done in 3D CGI completely, and it has a different, unique art style because of it. And that's kind of where the end of the Dragon Ball Super era of stuff is right now. Ignoring the end of the Dragon Ball Z story, which is officially the end, Superhero is as far as the timeline goes out for now, and we haven't seen what will come after that. And with the unfortunate tragic passing of Akira Toriyama, I'm not sure that anyone at Toei or Shueisha knows either. So now that brings us to a weird thing. Super Dragon Ball Heroes, airing from 2018 to 2024 for 56 episodes of about 10 to 11 minutes apiece. This is a series of short episodes meant to promote the Super Dragon Ball Heroes arcade game in Japan, which also means it has no official release outside of Japan or outside of regions that have that arcade game. There is no English dub, there's not even an official subtitled release. This is not canon, this is for fun, it's a promotional thing for a video game, and it does bring in a lot of elements from across the Dragon Ball franchise, including things that were previously only in video games, and also is kind of what establishes GT as its own universe, which I think is kind of a fun thing. But it's going to be for those hardcore Dragon Ball fans that'll understand all those references. So if you watched all of Dragon Ball up to this point and you want to watch something fun, Super Dragon Ball Heroes might be up your alley. And now that brings us to Dragon Ball Daima. This is a 2024 series that begins airing today, so I have no info on the actual story besides what was provided in trailers. It will be lasting 20 episodes, and it is the final work on Dragon Ball by Akira Toriyama, who did the world, the character setting, the story. He did pretty much everything. He was originally going to just consult on it, and he ended up kind of taking over the whole project. This is Toriyama's last work on Dragon Ball, and I'm very excited to see how the final product turned out. Now, in terms of timeline, based on the trailers and based on the placement of certain things, this does seem to take place during the time of peace prior to Super. So if you're going in timeline order, it's going to be after episode 287 of Z, after episode 165 of Kai, whichever way you go. Then after this would be Battle of Gods or Super, and then onward. I'll explain this in a moment. But this seemingly is taking place during that time of peace because of the lack of elements that were introduced in Super that would absolutely be in this if this took place after Super began. So that's just where I'm placing it. We'll see if I'm wrong. I'm sure the comment section will let me know if like the first episode comes out and Beerus is there and I'm like, oh no, my timeline. But speaking of the timeline, let's simplify this timeline for you. This is the simplified timeline section. If you're a first-time viewer who is overloaded with the information I gave out, which understandable, there's a lot, this is going to be how you do a streamlined experience. Also, long-term fans, if you're doing a rewatch and this works, please let me know. I really worked hard on trying to simplify this. This is what I call the essential stuff. This is not going to include extra things that you could include. It's just going to be simplified. Let's go through the simplified process. First up, of course, Dragon Ball, 153 episodes. Pretty straightforward. Then Dragon Ball Z Kai episodes 1 through 58. Then the History of Trunks special, followed up with Dragon Ball Z Kai episodes 59 through 165. Then Dragon Ball Daima. Then Dragon Ball Super, followed up with Dragon Ball Super Broly, Dragon Ball Super Superhero, and then lastly episodes 166 and 167 of Dragon Ball Kai. Like, once again, that last part of Kai, that last part of Z, I should say, that's probably getting rewritten in the future at some point, I imagine, just because of the things they've added in between now. But that is the timeline as it stands. That is what I call the simplified timeline. That is what I call all the essential stuff to see one of the greatest works by one of the greatest creators. That is the order I recommend. I hope it's simple enough for you, and I hope you'll check it out, because Dragon Ball is an amazing thing. So I hope that wasn't too painful. I know there's a lot of Dragon Ball material. I've grown up with this. I've known it my entire life, so it's kind of easy just to go, yeah, Super Android 13, that movie you don't have to fit anywhere. It's confusing if you're going it alone, and I hope this guide has been helpful. I hope that this has been helpful. Please let me know in the comments if it wasn't. I really need to know, because I'm trying to refine the process on these viewing guides, and viewer feedback is very important. I like getting feedback from people who are long-term fans, people that lapsed and are coming back, people who are new. Let me know. Also, any questions. I will try to answer any questions if the placement stuff got weird. I did kind of structure this to like sort of take your own notes, whether you wanted to go for full original Z or Kai, if you wanted to include some movies or not. The simplified timeline was just supposed to like go here, basics, like here's the main story, and that's kind of the idea behind it. So I hope you enjoyed it. You can rewind through and look over information again as you're going through it. This video will be available to you, and I hope it was helpful. If it was, and you haven't already, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe and the notification bell. Helps me out immensely to get this video out to more people and to do more videos on this channel. I have Dragon Ball videos planned in the future. You notice how I didn't talk about the Blu-rays or the DVDs? It's because that's a whole series of videos I want to do. So please let me know if that's something you want to see, because I definitely want to do it, but it's going to be a huge undertaking. Also, if you want to continue the conversation, we have a Discord server. Join in the link below. Come hang out, come chat. We talk about Dragon Ball a lot, especially when it comes to the home video releases. Come hang out and discuss and join our awesome community. Also, check out our live streams on this YouTube channel every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. We do news, we do talks, we do tier lists, we do all kinds of cool stuff. We just tier listed all the Dragon Ball arcs and movies, and it got really heated and fun. It was like a fun fan discussion about like, oh yeah, I think this one should be here and this one should be here, so go check that out. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel directly, consider joining as a channel member. There's perks like early access to videos, member exclusive live streams, and I'm trying to add some more stuff to it. It really helps build this channel and make it grow, so please consider joining as a channel member, and let's give a special shout out to some of our channel members. Special shout out to our channel members, including our captain tiers: Spin-54, Toma K, MasterBen95, Jamie's World, Forever1000, BJ Wanlun, Vangel Giorgio, Josh Frisch, Chubby Potato 153, Uncaged Otaku, Clint Jorgensen, Kamen Jojo, Stephen Hino Josa, Muhammad Faiz Daniel, Dominator, Yash Gangakur, RJ Wingo, Doge9789, Alex Alexis, and Brendan Donnellan. Thank you all for your support of this channel. If you so wish, you can find me across most social media at Soundout12, and you can find my awesome graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. And also be sure to check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for anime news, interviews, reviews, and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.